Welcome back to Faith is the Podcast. Today we're diving deep into something pretty amazing.
Okay.
Intimacy with God.
Oh, right.
And we're going beyond just like knowing about God.
Right.
We're talking about really like experiencing his presence
Yes.
in our lives.
Yeah.
And this connection is made possible through Jesus' gift of salvation.
It's fascinating how Apostle Michael Orokpo,
Yeah?
in his sermon, The Glory of Intimacy with God, really drives this point home.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of orphans
Oh, wow.
to describe those who haven't truly connected with God.
Interesting.
Yeah. He paints a picture of them kind of wandering aimlessly, longing for that sense of belonging and guidance that only a parent can provide.
That's such a vivid image. It's like feeling like a spiritual orphan.
Right.
I think I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That feeling of searching for something more, a deeper sense of purpose
Yes.
and direction in life.
I think we all can.
Yeah, and what I found so interesting in your notes was how Apostle Orokpo breaks down intimacy with God
Okay.
into these like specific elements.
Yes.
Or articles, as he called
It
them.
does call them articles. That's right. Yeah. There are 13 in total.
13.
13.
Wow. Okay, so we can't cover all of them?
Right.
But what were some of the articles that like
Okay.
really jumped out at you?
Well, his point about consistent seeking really struck me. It's not a one-time decision or a fleeting feeling, but an ongoing pursuit of God's presence. It's about cultivating a heart that constantly yearns for more of him.
I see.
Like a hunger that can never be fully satisfied.
That makes me think about those times when I felt distant from God. Almost like I've lost my way a little bit.
Right.
And it's reassuring to hear that it's like an ongoing journey. It's a process of continually drawing closer to him.
Absolutely.
So how do we actually like nurture that yearning?
Apostle Orokpo talks about love and devotion being essential.
Okay.
And he challenges us to make it a lifestyle, not just something we add to our to-do list.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice, though?
Okay.
Because we're all busy.
We are.
How do we make intimacy with God a part of our everyday lives?
Well, he talks about simple things like dedicating ourselves to a life of prayer, not just rattling off a list of requests, but truly pouring out our hearts to God. He also emphasizes digging deep into the scriptures, not just reading to check it off our list, but really immersing ourselves in God's word and allowing it to transform us from the inside out.
That's a great point. It's about quality, not just quantity.
Exactly.
You know I can get caught up in the routine of religious practice without really engaging my heart.
Right.
But you mentioned something else in your notes
that
got my attention.
All right, fasting.
To be honest, that's one I sometimes struggle with.
I know, it can seem a bit daunting.
Yeah.
But Apostle Orokpo presents fasting not as an obligation, but as a powerful tool for cultivating a deeper connection. It's about intentionally denying our physical desires so that we can focus more intently on God. He suggests that when we make that sacrifice, we create space for God to move in our lives in extraordinary ways.
It's like intentionally stepping away from the noise and distractions of the world so that we can tune into God's voice.
That's it.
More clearly.
Yeah, it's about prioritizing our relationship with God above our own comfort and desires.
That reminds me of another article you mentioned. Worship and adoration. And I think a lot of people might think of that as simply singing in church.
Right.
But I get the sense that Apostle Orokpo is talking about something much deeper.
He describes these incredible moments of spontaneous worship, people literally bursting into song, tears streaming down their faces, completely overtaken by the presence of God.
Oh, wow.
It's raw. It's powerful. It goes way beyond just singing hymns in church.
Wow. That sounds pretty intense.
It is.
I admit I've had those moments where I've felt a surge of emotion in church, but I haven't quite experienced that level of like spontaneous outpouring.
Right.
Do you think everyone is capable of that?
That's a great question.
Is it something that develops?
I think it speaks to the fact that intimacy with God is a journey, a process of ongoing growth and discovery.
It's not about reaching a certain level of spirituality, but about continuously opening our hearts to God's presence.
That's it.
And as we surrender to Him more fully, I think those moments of profound worship become more natural and more frequent.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about seeking God consistently, expressing our love and devotion, and cultivating a heart of worship.
Yes.
But there was another article you mentioned I want to touch on obedience.
Yes, this is where Apostle Orokpo gets very real. He emphasizes that true intimacy can't exist without aligning our lives with God's will.
So it's not enough to just feel close to God. Our actions have to reflect that closeness.
Exactly.
And it's not about trying to earn God's favor.
Right.
We talked about salvation being a free gift from Jesus.
Yes.
Obedience is about demonstrating the reality of that relationship through our choices and actions.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like putting our faith into practice.
It is.
Showing God that we're serious about this relationship.
He emphasizes that obedience isn't about a set of rules, but about a heartfelt desire to please God. It's about recognizing his authority in our lives and submitting to his guidance.
So it's about trust.
Yes.
Trusting that he knows what's best for us.
Yeah.
And following his lead.
Yeah.
Even when it's difficult or it doesn't make sense to us.
That's about surrendering our will to his and allowing him to work through us.
I'm starting to see how all of these articles fit together like pieces of a puzzle.
It is.
That create a complete picture.
It is a beautiful tapestry, isn't it?
And there's one more thread, I think.
Okay.
We need to weave into this picture.
All right.
Sacrifice. That's the one that always makes me pause.
Okay.
Especially in the context of the New Testament.
Right.
I mean, Jesus already made the ultimate sacrifice for us.
Yes.
So what more is required?
That's a common question, and Apostle Orokpo addresses it head on by reframing our understanding of sacrifice.
Okay.
In the modern Christian life, he challenges the notion that it's just about Old Testament rituals or giving money.
So if it's not about animal sacrifices or emptying our bank accounts,
what
does sacrifice look like?
Well, he starts by talking about offering our bodies as a living sacrifice.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense.
It does.
What does that actually mean?
He's talking about living a life of holiness and purity, choosing to honor God with our thoughts, words, and actions.
Okay.
It's about saying no to temptations that pull us away from him and choosing to live in a way that reflects his love and grace.
So it's about self-control.
Yes.
Making choices that align with our desire to be close to God.
He also talks about the sacrifice of praise.
Oh, okay.
Continuously offering thanks to God regardless of our circumstances.
I love that. It's about choosing gratitude.
Yes.
Even when things are tough.
It is.
Recognizing that God is good.
Yes.
Even in the midst of trials.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, he emphasizes the sacrifice of self-denial, choosing God's will over our own comfort and desires. It's about saying yes to God, even when it means saying no to ourselves.
This is starting to paint a much clearer picture of what modern sacrifice looks like.
It's not about outward rituals and inward transformation. A willingness to surrender in our own desires and align our lives with God's will.
And that brings us to a really important question.
Okay.
If we're putting in all this effort to cultivate intimacy with God, what's in it for us?
Right.
What are the benefits?
Yeah, what are the benefits?
Right.
That's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
Apostle Orokpo doesn't just leave us with a list of to-dos.
Right.
He goes on to describe the incredible blessings that flow from a life of intimacy with God.
So spill the tea.
Okay.
What kind of blessings are we talking about?
All right. Well, he starts with something I think we all crave. Peace and rest.
And he's not talking about just kicking back and relaxing on the weekends.
He's describing this deep, unshakable inner stability, a calmness that transcends our circumstances.
Okay.
It's the kind of peace that the world just can't offer.
Yeah.
The kind that stays with you, even when life gets crazy.
That's so appealing, especially in today's world.
I know.
Where everything feels so chaotic and uncertain.
Yes.
It's like having this anchor in the midst of a storm.
Yes.
Knowing that no matter what happens,
you
have this inner peace.
That's right.
That can't be shaken.
He actually shares a story about a friend who was going through an incredibly difficult time, job loss, family problems, health issues, you name it.
Okay.
But even in the middle of all that turmoil, this friend had this incredible sense of peace because of his deep connection with God.
Okay.
He knew that God was with him, guiding him through the storm.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's like knowing that even when things fall apart, you're not alone.
Right.
You have this source of strength and comfort that's always available to you.
That's right.
And that peace leads to another amazing blessing.
It does.
Wisdom and guidance.
Apostle Orokpo describes it as having this internal GPS for life.
Interesting.
Where you're not constantly second-guessing yourself or feeling lost and uncertain.
So instead of stressing out and trying to figure everything out on our own, we can tap into this inner wisdom that comes from being connected to God.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not about having all the answers, but about trusting that God will guide our steps,
He will.
show us the way,
Yes.
even when we can't see the full picture.
You know, I've definitely had those moments where I felt stuck, unsure of which direction to take.
Right.
And I love the idea of having this inner compass.
Yeah.
It's always pointing me towards God's best for my life.
He also talks about this incredible blessing
He does.
of preservation and protection.
He shares some really vivid examples of how God protects those who are intimately connected to him. It's almost like dangers and threats.
Wow.
Miraculously pass them by as if there's an invisible shield around them.
That makes me think of that psalm that talks about dwelling in the secret place of the Most High.
Yes.
And abiding under the shadow of the Almighty.
Yes.
It paints this picture of safety and security that comes from knowing
Right.
that God is watching over us.
He is.
Have you ever experienced that sense of protection
Absolutely.
in your own life?
I remember one time.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
It sounds like we're going to have to dive into that story.
You're right.
After a quick word from our sponsor.
Okay.
We'll be right back with more incredible blessings.
Oh, right.
From Apostle Michael Orokpo.
Sounds good.
Right here on Faith is the Podcast. Welcome back to Faith is the Podcast.
I remember one time I was driving home late one night.
Okay.
And I hit a patch of black ice.
Oh, no.
And my car spun out of control.
Wow.
And ended up facing oncoming traffic.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I just braced myself for impact.
Right.
But incredibly, not a single car was coming.
Wow.
It felt like everything just stopped for a moment.
Yeah.
Like time stood still.
That's incredible.
I truly believe it was God's protection that kept me safe that night.
It really does make you realize there's something bigger than ourselves at work.
Yes.
A force that's watching over us.
That's right.
Even when we're not aware of it.
And that sense of being cared for extends to every area of our lives.
Okay.
Apostle Orokpo also talks about the incredible provision and blessing.
So we're not just talking about like spiritual blessings, but tangible real world blessings as well.
Yeah, he shares this amazing story about a friend who was facing serious financial hardship. This friend had been praying and fasting for weeks.
Okay.
Seeking God's guidance and provision.
Right.
And then seemingly out of nowhere, he received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative he didn't even know existed.
It's like those moments when you feel like you're at the end of your rope and then suddenly a door opens that you never even saw coming.
It's about trusting that God knows our needs even before we ask. And he delights in taking care of his children.
I love that.
He always provides.
This sounds incredibly inspiring.
It is.
But I think a lot of people listening might be wondering how to actually cultivate this level of intimacy with God.
He emphasizes the importance of structure and discipline.
Okay, so it's about intentionally creating space in our lives for God.
Not just squeezing him into the leftover moment.
Right, it's not about passively waiting for God to show up.
Right.
But about actively pursuing him. Making him a priority.
That's it.
In our daily lives.
He talks about practical things like scheduling regular time for prayer, finding a quiet space for reflection and meditation, and having a consistent plan for studying the Bible.
It's like any important relationship. It takes effort and intentionality to keep it strong and thriving.
We wouldn't expect to maintain a close friendship without investing time and energy into it.
And just like in any relationship, communication is key.
It is.
Apostle Orokpo reminds us
to
not only talk to God through prayer, but to also listen for his voice speaking to us.
It's a two-way street.
So we're not just pouring their hearts out, but we're also actively seeking his guidance.
And he speaks to us in so many ways, through the scriptures, through our intuition, through the circumstances of our lives, even through other people.
That's so true.
It is.
I've had those moments where a friend said something or I read a particular passage, and it felt like God was speaking directly to me.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how he uses those everyday moments to connect with us.
He does.
And there's one more piece of advice Apostle Orokpo offers that I think is so important. He stresses that we're not meant to do this alone.
That's right.
The power of community.
He encourages us to surround ourselves with other believers, to find a community of people who are also passionate about their faith.
It's like having a spiritual support system.
Yes.
A group of people who understand the journey and can encourage us along the way.
And when we see other people living out their faith in a genuine way, it inspires us to deepen our own relationship with God.
Exactly. It's about sharing our struggles, celebrating our victories, and learning from one another.
That's right.
It's about spurring each other on towards greater intimacy with God.
Absolutely.
This has been such a rich conversation.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on intimacy with God.
It's not just an abstract concept, but a tangible reality.
Right.
We can experience it in our everyday lives.
Well said. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank Business Referred for sponsoring this episode.
Great.
If you're a local business looking to reach a wider audience, be sure to check them out at info@businessreferred.com.
All right.
They do amazing work.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on Faith is the Podcast.
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to pursue a deeper connection with God.
Remember, intimacy with God is not a destination,
right,
but a journey.
Embrace the process. Seek Him with all your heart and watch as He pours out His blessings on you in abundance.
Yes.
Until next time, may you experience the fullness of God's love and presence in your lives.